Thank you for joining us today for a very timely topic, resiliency in the workplace. And joining us to delve into the subject today is Dr. Sandra Casey Buford, who is an award-winning author and speaker. And she has very well known for her tireless work with the topic of diversity and inclusion, working with many esteemed organizations such as Harvard University and many others. And her current project, though, is exploring the prevalence and impact of resiliency in both the workplace and in people's personal lives, and is proving to be a topic of great importance. So thank you for being with us today, Dr. Casey Buford. And your resume, Doctor, is quite impressive. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about some of your work.
Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank you, Penny, for having me today. I just absolutely love talking about this topic, and it's sort of like the crescent of my work. I've been doing organizational development and behavior work for over 25 years. I've worked with many types of organizations, including transportation, technology, as well as healthcare, and I do a lot of work with academia. So I have a full range of perspectives as I approach my work. I do my work also domestically, but what I really love is the fact that I've been able to work with a number of global organizations. I like to list some of them as a couple of areas of the UK, both London and Windsor. I've also done work in Galway, Ireland, Italy, Germany, Switzerland, as well as Canada and Barcelona, Spain. So I have a very broad brush background that allows me to pull in from many different diverse cultures and viewpoints and perspectives. My work is basically organizational development behavior, which encompasses change management, as well as just basically helping organizations to be the very best that they can. And I also am an executive coach, so I use and bring in a lot of my learnings to help individuals as well.
That's great, great. I know in the time I've known you, I know you have always impressed me with your background and the work that you do, and your love of travel really helped connect us. I know several
Yeah.
years ago when we met, so that was a common interest that we share.
Yeah.
So getting right into today's topic about resiliency, though, what is it about this topic that first piqued your interest?
Well, I'd like to start by just saying that, just so that we're all on the same plane, that resilience is actually the state of overcoming change, disruption, adversity, trauma, anything that upsets the status quo. That's what I like to think about it. And the ability to bounce back, recover, and continue on. So that's what diverse resiliency actually means to me. I first became interested in it. I would have to say it was probably in the late 1990s. When organizations and individuals were confronted with sweeping changes that were occurring at a very rapid rate. You may remember, Penny, some of the terminology that was used: restructuring organizations.
Yes.
And then the less desirable term, downsizing.
Oh, yeah.
And basically organizational change and transformational change really sort of stemmed out of that. So I became interested because what I noticed, and I confirmed and reaffirmed, that there were varying responses to these changes. And also that I noted that the way that an organization or an individual responded really was a predictor of success or failure. In many different cases, I noticed that there were some organizations that were able to bounce back quickly and solidly, and then there were other organizations and individuals that lagged behind. So I became interested in what is that? What are the factors that allow an organization to be agile and
Hmm.
able to bounce back quickly? And while some organizations sort of sit in a daze and lose traction. So that's how I got interested in resiliency.
That makes sense. Yes. Well, remember working in corporate America with the time of downsizing, as you said, was kind of a harsh term and an unpopular term. So some organizations that were right sizing, and it was basically the same thing, but it had a nicer ring to it.
Same
um,
with the same effect on both the
same,
organizational life and individuals.
absolutely, absolutely. So I'd like to ask, so you became interested in this, as you mentioned, years ago, in the 90s. Has the essence or the meaning of resiliency changed over time, particularly since the pandemic? Thinking now with the last 14, 16 months, whatever it's been, how has resiliency and the idea of resiliency and agility, as you mentioned, has it changed since the pandemic?
Well, I have to say the basic definition of resiliency, to me, has remained unchanged, although change takes many forms, and in fact, with some of the recent occurrences, we're using terms like unprecedented
Yes.
global change, we're using global disruption, things of that nature.
Hmm.
So the
Right.
breadth, scope, type of changes are definitely evolving
Hmm.
with in response to external pressures as well as internal pressures and demands. But the nature of change and disruption, even though each of those instances or those occurrences are unique within themselves, that's one of the things I'm exploring is
Yes.
are the factors, are the skills that we've used over the years the same, or are we actually developing or evolving, I don't necessarily like to use that word, but evolving into something else. And I'd like to just mention that we learned a lot from situations such as 9/11 that occurred,
Right.
I should
Right.
say, catastrophic events. Just
Hmm.
recently, we had the attack on the Capitol.
Right.
We had George Floyd, global impact of,
Yes.
the understanding and the awareness of racial inequality. And of course, we've had COVID. And so this is what I believe today. This is my sort of my hypothesis,
Okay.
is that I believe that there's a core set of skills, okay, a core set. And I believe that some of those are innate to humans to respond to. What I think is going to be interesting in my current work is, again, are there some additional or intensified or amplified actions that are needed or that to really face some of these unprecedented events that we have come across recently. So I believe that the definition of resiliency will become more finitely finitely defined as we observe how people are
Hmm.
responding to these current challenges. And I also believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think
Okay.
that we're on a trajectory of unprecedented change.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. And speaking to a lot of individuals in different organizations, it's still developing, and it's going to be interesting to see how it looks 6 months from now, a year from now, and 2 years from now. I agree. So, in your research that you've done so far with resiliency and agility, have you been able to identify any particular demographic that seems to struggle the most with resiliency and agility?
Well, that's an interesting question because past studies, I have learned that women and people of color have consistently emerged as highly resilient,
Yes.
overcoming lots, breaking the glass ceiling, for example. And also, we are now seeing some progress in many different areas where we're seeing more people of color and from various backgrounds, emerging as leaders in various sectors of both the economy as well as political. However, I decided that I'm going to approach this work that I'm currently engaged in with an open mind,
Mm-hmm.
because what's exciting to me about my current work is that I'm looking, and I'm in the mode of discovery. I'm
Right.
in the mode to keep that open mind, to allow the data to emerge in a very organic way, so that that's going to be the true learning. So
Great.
I have developed a set of tools that I use to do the research.
Mm-hmm.
But, I've been doing research for many, many different years. And as far as qualitative research, I'd like to consider myself to be pretty proficient at that.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the beauties of qualitative research is the ability to probe, the ability to drill down on an initial question. So I'm very excited to allow the process to really yield the most outstanding learnings that can come out of this. And I do believe that there's a lot that we have to learn.
Yes, I agree. I for one am very excited to see what your research shows and how this all plays out. So, as far as if there are businesses and organizations that are struggling to adapt to the changes, who are struggling to um, morph and adapt to the changes with their workforce, with the customer base, because the world has changed. There's no doubt about it. And there's no going back. So, what advice or suggestion would you give to organizations who are struggling?
Well, some of the suggestions that I give, and when I was looking at a comparison of some of the work I've done on change management, um, you know, one of the things that I really stress to organizations is that they need to be very proactive. And that word is sometimes overused, but
Mhm.
they will benefit by staying abreast and even ahead of current and future trends on the world scene.
Right.
I find that some organizations, many organizations, tend to live in the 50-mile radius of their business. And I think that's a big mistake. There needs to
Mhm.
be almost an expert on staff to be looking at what's happening in the world,
Yeah.
both domestically and globally, and how the things that are happening and emerging are going to have an impact on their organization. I also believe it's important to study the past and take the lessons that
Mhm.
have emerged and learn from them and see what is adaptable to their particular business. And also, most important is having contingency plans in
Right.
place for all areas of the organization, as well as the organizational members. Because often organizations will have grandiose contingency strategies on paper, in a binder, on a shelf,
All right.
and that is all well and fine, but that needs to be a living document
Yeah.
that is being revisited at least quarterly, but
Hmm.
on a regular basis. And also, I advise organizations to tap into the intelligence of their members, because sometimes the members of an organization are
Exactly.
more in tune to what's actually happening than even CNN,
Yeah.
because they are living on a level where many
Right.
things occur. So basically, in engaging all members of the organization in contingency planning, making that contingency plan a living document, living, breathing document that is constantly updated, making sure that everyone is on board with what to do in the case of unusual circumstances.
Right. I agree with you 100%. I know I've been following along as McKinsey's been doing a lot of research and during this pandemic and the impact on businesses and individuals. And they agree with you. That's their findings also is that organizations have to involve everyone and
Mhm.
have contingency plans in place that are active, as you pointed out. So excellent call out. So let me ask you, what is next for you on this topic? I know you're continuing your research, and then what?
Well, I think the current research, it has the most value. There's tons of literature that it's written on resiliency, and
Hmm.
but my goal in this process is to really get as close to the actual the life of resiliency, both in organizations and in individuals' lives.
Hmm.
I'm very, very passionate about zoning in on any nuances around addressing how people are surviving or being resilient in this environment. I believe that there's a whole wealth of knowledge that is embedded within organizations and within individuals. And you know, one of the challenges that I see is that sometimes organizations are so busy in the day to day,
Hmm.
and
Right.
especially now with smaller organizations just trying to stay competitive and stay on the radar screen. But I believe it's a great investment to continue to really look at what's next. Do I believe that there'll be another pandemic? Unfortunately, I think so. I think we're in a
Hmm.
time period where that is a real possibility. We are already looking at the variants, for example. What does that mean? If I were an organization, I would be really paying attention to what's happening with the current COVID virus. What are the trends? What are, you know, doing almost a day to day on what is happening and maybe doing some scenarios on what that means for me as an organization. And I think
Yes,
individuals should do the same.
I
So
agree.
I'm really anxious to continue this work. I'm interviewing individuals and organizations, and I'm bringing this work together. Hopefully, I will have some really meaningful case studies to put forward and some really meaningful advice for organizations.
That's great. We're really looking forward to, yes, looking
Yes.
forward to the results of your work and your findings. It's very exciting. I find it fascinating. And I
Mhm.
think this will be very important for, as you said, organizations and individuals. So appreciate that. So Dr. Casey Buford, thank you for joining us today. Tell us where can individuals, if they want to learn more about your work, where can they find that?
The best thing to do right now, because this work, Penny, just really took a life of its own in around April 2021.
Hmm.
So right now, the best way that people can get in touch with me is simply to send me an email
Great.
and put in the subject line resiliency. And
Nice.
even though I get hundreds of emails every single day, when I see that in the subject line, that gets priority. So Sandra Casey Buford at gmail.com. It's simple.
Great.
Put resiliency in the subject line, and I will definitely engage with you.
Great. Thank you so much, Doctor. Appreciate your time today, and we will no doubt be bringing you back on for in the future to see what updates you have for us on this topic.
I would
Thank,
absolutely love it. Thank you very much.
thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'll have the information, Dr. Casey Buford's email address and the topics and a summary of that in the post as well. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
Okay. Thank you, Penny.